So hi everyone, welcome to Talking Tech with Legal IT Insider. I'm your host, Caroline Hill, and today we're having a webinar talking about 30 years of legal tech. So we celebrated our 30th just the other week, and iManage is also celebrating its 30th year this year, and was a sponsor, a platinum sponsor of our event. So today we're going to be talking about some of the key takeaways from the conference. I'm joined by Paul Walker, who many of you will know. He's Global Solutions Director at iManage, where he helps define and deliver solutions that bring advanced tech and AI into practical use for law firms and corporate legal teams. I didn't read that. Hi, Paul.
I was trying to work out what I do. Right, okay. Where'd that come from? Hey, welcome to everyone. Great to be on this session again with everyone.
Yeah, really nice to see you again, Paul. So we've got a lot to talk about in a short space of time. So just in terms of the agenda for people listening in, we will be looking at the sessions from our 30th, which took place in London, and we had 3 panels for the day. So we had security and risk, looked at firms that are embedding AI registers. We'll be having a discussion about that and about some about the deepfake demonstration that Andrew Powell from Macfarlanes gave us, amongst other things. We'll be looking at the panel on data management and AI value. So we'll be talking a bit about ROI, curated knowledge versus raw data, and the integration challenge. We'll be talking about the session on is DMS the future. There were some observations around, so DMS is a kind of crossroads almost. So there were some observations around is DMS an overpriced utility, discussions around SharePoint, and also what in some of the follow-up what a reimagined knowledge infrastructure might look like, and then we'll be doing a bit of future gazing in terms of what trends and patterns are emerging around how law firms are approaching their AI strategies. Not much then, Paul. Quite short, really. There's not much to talk about. What were your did you enjoy the event?
I did. It was a good event. It's rare to kind of get that community of people together in a room. You know, I won't say the great and good, because that would be dismissive of people who didn't make it or couldn't suddenly make the day. But there was a good, fair representation of, I think, the UK legal tech market in that room, and that's, again, it doesn't happen often. We'll do lots of events, but events often have stands, and we're all on our stands, and we're all there for different reasons. But it's good for the format of sitting down on the round tables, and some of the discussions were very enlightening. some of them did feel like I was debating my own future, but that aside, we'll come on to that a little bit later.
I love that discussion. I think we can't keep coming back to that face-to-face time. You're right, they're really senior people, and also we had throw around microphones, which caused absolute chaos, but it's that bringing people together, isn't it? And that really hearing from everybody, not to take away from panels are great, but not just the panel talking at people, but just that really collaborative conversation that we had, which I thought was really helpful and fun. What stood out most, would you say, from the 3 sessions?
There was a lot that stood out, but I think, probably going in order in my own mind, I think, as you mentioned, the deepfake video, I think that was just enlightening, right, or scary in equal measure. It's actually got to be questioning, Caroline, whether you're actually real. And I'm actually talking to a deepfake myself here, or am I real? Maybe I'm not here. I'm not sure, but it was quite scary. Just the accuracy. I mean, you could see the joins on it in terms of where Andrew's face had been placed and stuff, and some of the words, etc. But the fact that it was able, Andrew was able to demonstrate having a conversation with an alternative version of himself, and you could see how that could fool a lot of people when they're not looking closely. It was quite scary.
It was scary, was it? So just for anybody, like, a lot of people weren't there. Unfortunately, it was quite limited numbers, really. But so Andrew, with deliberately small amount of money and time, trained his digital twin he had a conversation live with his digital twin at the event, which was, I think, one of the words you've used, Paul, is sobering, and I agree with you, and he gave it very few instructions, really. He just said, he said to be very enthusiastic about any mention of Legal IT Insider and Caroline Hill, which I was very much a fan of. But he was able to demonstrate, wasn't he, about transferring. He gave instructions to transfer me £2 million, which is yet to arrive, I'd just like to say, and it was able to demonstrate how the digital twin override any kind of security protocols by going, do you not know, I'm in a rush, do you know who I am? I'm clearly Andrew Powell. It was really scary, for sure.
It has. It's kind of moved almost the digital verification to the next level, right? We kind of moved down that, we've gone from physical face to face, and we went to kind of voice, and then voice no longer works. That wasn't secure enough. And now with the physical, even seeing the face, and even seeing the face moving and talking, and even hearing the voice that you know and recognize, now it can no longer be trusted at this point.
Okay. You're going to have like someone queried after the event whether we'll have to have MFA for anything that involves transfer of money or anything like that. You're going to have some kind of protocol, aren't you, basically?
Multiple people in the chain, potentially, yeah.
Especially
as law firms, again, law firms move a lot of money on behalf of their clients, when you think about property transactions, etc. So again, it's a very clear and present risk for law firms in terms of how those transfers happen. And I think a lot of them historically probably been based on a lot of trust. And this probably puts a bit of a challenge on that trust.
I think absolutely. I think it's so good to see it live. I saw it live at Ilticon as well. Jim McKenna did this, and Andrew was there. And I think more people need to see it to kind of bring home the reality. That also, so that first panel. So we had Magalon de Brugiere, who's the head of GenAI risk at HSFK, and she talked about the work that the firm is doing, embedding the AI risk register across the enterprise risk framework. And so they're kind of mapping out AI risk across the whole firm, and also apportioning control to giving individuals control of various risks. What do you think? What did you make of that?
I mean, she was quite detailed and good, right? I mean, she was quite advanced in her thinking in terms of where they are. I'm not sure that's true of everyone. It's because it's a complex area, and I think it takes a complex set of skills and understanding to do that. And it's very kind of heavy process. And then, we even internally in iManage, we a lot of the applications we use day in day out have AI appearing in them, as you'd expect. It's not. We no longer have one tool. We have many AI tools. And vendors just switch on these capabilities, and then suddenly content is inadvertently going to the AI engines. And to think that all content is either approved or not approved to go to an engine is probably wrong. And we're seeing that again. We're seeing it from our customer base. There are different rules for different pieces of content. There are different rules for different clients, etc. And managing some of that risk and how the data flows around the organization and outside the organization, I think it's a challenge. They had a very good framework, and there are some standards. I think ISO 42001 was one that they'd adopted, but they're really just frameworks. And really, again, it comes down to a lot of due diligence and a lot of care, which tools are being enabled within organizations and utilized by the staff of organizations. I think one interesting thing that kind of came up on this one as well was, I think that it was interesting that I think when ChatGPT first came out, a lot of organizations locked it down, blocked it. They put it on the deny list. And then it was interesting because I won't say which one in the panel said, I assume everyone's now allowed it. And there was a very mixed feeling in the audience, like, no, we still lock it down. And so there was almost like a split audience here about, some have just gone, we can't control it. We control this via policy and best practice. And some have gone, no, we stop it, we restrict it. To be honest, I'm not sure which way is the best.
It's difficult because the risk is if you lock it down, they'll access it anyway. I mean, it was interesting.
They get to personal devices, right? They'll use their phone, their iPads, etc.
Unless you're provided with something which is regarded to be as good, I think, because it is so effective, and people have. It's almost like someone described it once to me as quite addictive, because once you know how capable, what it's capable of, and the speed that it can do things in, it's very hard to go from that to nothing. If there was a lag in, but so it's interesting. So Thomson Reuters were on the panel, and they talked about their approach to this, which I thought was really interesting. So they talked about their AI proxy. So they have created a layer through which they control access, don't they, to the likes of ChatGPT. So they're allowed internally to access it via the proxy. So Thomson Reuters can control what's being asked of it, which I think seems to be a brilliant solution.
Yeah, and we're starting to see kind of growth in that, and TR obviously spoke to theirs, but we're starting to see things like one that springs to mind is Relativity, the discovery vendor. So they've built ChatGPT connectors to start sucking in for ChatGPT Enterprise, for example, so customers who are using the Enterprise version, but it starts sucking in all the conversations and the artifacts. So when you have a disclosure need, you can go into the back end and I think it live sucks them out, because I think there's data retention set on those conversations, and it's normally quite like 90 days, 180 days, etc. So they're sucking all that out so that they're storing it in the archives ready for e-discovery, because some of the conversations people are having are potentially litigious and all sorts, right? They're being used to generate client work, etc. So it's becoming an important part of the record of what an organization does.
I think people lull themselves into slightly false sense of security over what's confidential and what's not, and so sometimes there's a bit of a grey area of what's okay and what's not. The other interesting thing that came up is around insurance. So we had Lee Kilner from House Percival on the panel, as you saw, and he was talking about insurers now asking about AI risk management, which it feels like Lee didn't say this, I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it feels to me like they took quite a long time to catch up. And so are you seeing that? What are you hearing from firms, and what do they need to demonstrate?
I mean, I think it's an extension of what's already been there for some time anyway, in terms of where the data is and controlling the data, and are you maintaining accurate records. AI is almost the latest and almost hardest problem that layers on top of that. But yes, the insurers, AI represents a data leak risk, much like any other system previously, or potential system that could be adopted like in a rogue IT type way. But it is a more, I guess, invasive technology. People are more compelled to use it, and it's harder to provide them alternatives. Some of the locked away internal alternatives kind of do restrict some of the functionality that people desire, and they can get on the more cutting edge platforms, etc., that live out there. So it's a moving challenge. I only expect it to grow, and I expect at some point there will be some bad press around leakages, etc. I'm sure it'll happen at some point. Who knows? We haven't really seen too much yet, but
no, it's all been around hallucination, really, hasn't it, so far? That side of things. But there's more to come. It was interesting. You referenced those frameworks, so 42001 and NIST. It'd be interesting to see whether insurers starting to. I mean, there was a conversation on a panel as to whether those were appropriate, and it was felt. I think, if you could say, there was a conclusion that probably 42001 was not appropriate for law firms, perhaps maybe more NIST with that. But it'd be interesting to see if insurers start to drive towards, because how do they, there's not really at the moment any kind of sort of consensus or framework. So it'd be interesting to see whether they sort of edge towards one of those.
This will come from one of two ways. A law firm, wrongly or rightly, can say yes or no, they want to do it, or they agree with it. It's either going to come from the insurers or it's going to come from the clients. The clients are either going to start demanding it, or the insurers, or both. And then once they both start, you've got insurance, which is the cost, and you've got clients, which is the revenue, and you don't want to affect either of those. So once the revenue or the cost is impacted, I think if that happens, that's when law firms will probably say it's more necessary. And we saw this with almost the early days of ISO 27001 again, cyber essentials and things like that. It took the surrounding ecosystem to say it's a must to drive the adoption. And, again, we have it from a selfish iManage point of view. We have things like SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, and that's mandated by many of the financial services organizations that we work with. So it's mandated by the clients, and so we have to get on board, or you don't keep the client.
I think those frameworks are perhaps I think it was felt that 42001 would be more suited to vendors. I think that's, yeah, no, it's such an interesting conversation. By all means, jump in if you've got questions. I know probably people will ask questions when we get to DMS, but please do feel free to jump in and have a chat with us. So, and do you think, so there was some talk about AI confidence. So what do you think that means in practice? Like on the panel, like, are you confident in your frameworks? Are you confident in your arrangements? What do you think it meant?
I mean, I guess we've got a particular angle on this, and I'm going to slightly be selfish on this one. For us, AI confidence, it can mean a couple of things. It can be confidence in the outputs of AI in terms of, again, the hallucination angle. Are you getting something that is accurate from the questions you're asking or the data set that you're asking? But I guess we see it as a broader sense, which is, are you confident in the data and where the data is, and is the data being managed and being fed into the AI? Is it the correct data? Again, where we see challenges here is, often if you look at a lot of the legal use cases, there's normally a starting point, a starting asset, a document, a piece of knowledge, a template of some form. And when you start some form of AI flow, that asset is at the core. You're comparing it to something which is the baseline. And then what we're starting to see that, quite rightly, people have rushed to that piece of functionality and they've adopted it, but actually maintaining the standard in a system that's out there, and maybe you've got 15 of these different systems and they've all got different versions of these standards. So then you put the process at risk, because if the master changes, then you've got different engines giving different responses and exposing different risks because they're not updated to represent the master. So we see confidence in basically, is the end user confident in the resources that you're using to generate answers and responses to different legal questions? Are they accurate and up to date? Are they current? This has always been a problem for the knowledge, what we call the knowledge life cycle, how you maintain the best advice to your lawyers so that they're always operating on the most current. What you don't want them operating on, something that's out of date, that now introduces risk into that process. So we see that AI confidence as having some degree of certainty in the data and the access to the data, but also a confidence in the organization in that the right data is being used by the AI in a secure way. So there isn't inadvertent sort of data leakage coming through from matter files that shouldn't be anywhere near AI.
I do think so. There's the security angle, and then there's the adoption angle around that, which is obviously it's very early stages. Adoption is still a challenge, depending on what you're talking about, but generally speaking, and it takes one thing to be done wrong for the lawyers to sort of feel that the whole thing is, too complex or prone to mistake. It's quite a fragile. You have to be very careful from that perspective, I think.
It's interesting. Again, my kind of thinking on this has kind of evolved. It's actually evolved in recent weeks of being at various kind of speaking events, etc., and speaking to different people in the industry. One of the things that has kind of changed is, this AI is not like yes, there is efficiency gains to be had from adopting AI and using AI, but it's now reaching the point where AI is you have to have AI to combat the fact that what's coming in is generated by AI.
Yeah.
So there's a trend that we're starting to see happen in the industry, which is, if you look at things like customer complaints, if you look at things like employee grievances, they're starting to get longer. So when they're not, and we don't just mean longer like, what used to be a 1-paragraph email is now turned into a 2-paragraph email. A complaint from a customer now comes in the form of a 20-page document that cites case law, and that used to be a paragraph in an email. And so it used to be case handlers that used to manage that. But now, because it's referencing case law, suddenly you need a lawyer to review it. And the lawyer suddenly have to review a 20-page document. And so now you need an AI tool to actually do that first pass analysis, because AI is generating this much longer content. And again, we're starting to see this in things like employee grievances, where they are getting longer. And they're getting longer for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because they can use AI to generate the response. But also, we're seeing evidence of employees mining the data that they have access to. We're on a Teams call today. It's probably being transcribed. People are capturing these Teams calls and these conversations and the transcriptions. They're storing their own private copies of them. And then if they have an issue in 2 years' time, they've got that record of that conversation, and it's being used to help generate the case that they make against their employers.
Yeah. I'm going to be, so just for anyone who didn't join right from the start, we're going to go on to talk about the second panel, which was data management and AI, and also then come on to the DMS panel, DMS at a crossroads. So, but it's interesting because you touched on a point. It was almost like a perfect segue where you're saying about
it's almost like it was planned.
So in the second panel, which was chaired by Ollie Bethel from Travis Smith, and was a fantastic panel, they talked about AI being just a cost of doing business now. They had a very wide ranging. They said the focus was data and data management and data quality, but they talked about a vast amount of things really. And they did touch on ROI. I thought we were going to go down the billable hour route, but we sort of touched on that, but we didn't. But what did you make from that panel? Do you think that, without diving too much into the ROI point, because we've got a lot more to cover, but do you think firms need to think about it differently?
I think it literally I was just in the office in Chicago talking to our CIO, and who's trying to evaluate the ROI of our use of AI and struggling quite understandably.
Yeah,
I was like, we said, I basically said we were not alone here, right? No one can calculate this ROI. I can give you 100 examples of how I've used AI in the last week, and all I can quantify is that it's taking tasks that I used to do that could take me 1 or 2 weeks, and it's boiling it down to an hour. So that's maybe an ROI, but it's not necessarily tasks that I do day in, day out. So it's not repeatable tasks. It's one-off tasks that maybe I might do every 2 or 3 months, but they're all getting shorter. And there are a lot of tasks that I now can do that I never used to do because I could never quite get to them. And now I can go to AI and get them done in a far quicker and easier way. So the ROI discussion is, I'm sure it'll continue to roll on and be debated. But some of you may know a gentleman called Jan van Hoek, one of the original founders of Raven. He was part of this conversation in the office and Jan said, I think the way to test this is to take the tool away from the people who use it and test the reaction. And if they notice and they complain, then that's your ROI. And I understandably said, I use Anthropic Claude, quite heavily, and I said, if you took that away, I'd probably cry. I'd probably leave. It's gone that much part of my core work.
Yeah,
I rely on it so heavily.
It's so it doesn't help with the calculation. I mean, I agree with you totally.
It doesn't help with finance.
Yeah, it's like, when they're paying for tools and the board are asking, how can we demonstrate a return of investment? I think better ways to monitor and capture that time saving, because I think you're right that there are time savings, but it's very hard to capture those, particularly if it's on ad hoc rather than repeatable tasks. But I guess you start where it is repeatable. That's where you start, right? And I think also there has been a bit of a leap of faith in the industry. I've seen a big sea change on the ROI. They kind of like, they know that they have to have it, and so they're being a bit more patient about being able to demonstrate ROI, which is a really, really interesting sea change. There was also an interesting discussion on the panel about that was Judy Mackenzie Stewart from BCLP, who's their global head of knowledge. She was talking about AI improving the quality of work, not just the speed, which was really fascinating. And she was making the point about adoption is really high, and it's just it's changing outcomes, not just accelerating them. I don't know what your takeaways. I thought that was fascinating as well.
And Judy and I sing from a similar hymn sheet. Again, she's very focused on identifying what are the nuggets of data in particular within an organization and surfacing that up to AI, that knowledge bank in this essence. I completely agreed with everything Judy said, but I think she had some very sensible comments. I've got my train of thought. I mean, I think when we think about AI as well, and I think we think about the end user and we think about them doing a job and a task, but we're just at the kind of edge of moving into a more agentic AI, and it taking on more tasks and more jobs. And I think that's where an ROI will become a lot clearer from the industry, because that's where it's not about replacing humans, but there's just tasks that could get done a bit smarter, a bit quicker. and that they tend to not be done consistently by humans. So we think that humans are perfect and they do a task the same every time, but they don't. And Caroline, you've practiced in your history, and there was jobs like going through, I don't know, a set of leases and extracting out data points and putting them into an Excel spreadsheet, and you'd have to do 1,000 of those in a day. The accuracy levels on those are shocking when you put a human at work in that. Duplicate entries, missed entries, a copy and paste that's gone wrong. You're talking sort of in the regions of 70-80%. Admittedly, you can have second passes and different people reviewing and second reviewing and comparisons and things like that to drive up the accuracy. But ultimately, you get up to very higher levels of accuracy straight out the box, right? With AI, you're at 90-95%, and it's all built on that prompt ultimately.
Exactly. I see it, but I don't use it to write my work. I'm not actually digital twin, and actually I'm in the Maldives. but I do use it a lot, and you can see and the benchmarking summaries. Sorry, the benchmarking tests around summarization and some of the tasks that you're talking about show that the humans are far from 100%. That actually the accuracy is quite shockingly bad at times. So she also talked about curated data. So and this goes to the whole debate at the moment around how clean data needs to be. So she was talking about they use curated data. She's obviously in the knowledge side of things, and was talking about the importance of curated data. I think there's a big debate going on now around how clean your data needs to be, whether actually. I still have conversations with people where they're like, oh, we can come back to AI perhaps cleaning up the data either now or another time. But aside from that, just in terms of literally how good your data needs to be, there's a perception perhaps that it doesn't need to be curated data in some circles. But she was emphasizing the importance of having that curated data.
Yeah, and it, again, and we see this in, we've been working with very closely with the likes of Harvey and Legora, etc. And both Harvey and Legora, again, created technologies where effectively the users can be curating their own mini sets of data. The Harvey Vault, for example, users can put in sets of documents or research, etc., into those vaults, and then they can effectively build a project off that and a set of flows that run off that, which is great technology. The big challenge there is what happens when some of that data goes out of date. The user often doesn't know or doesn't have the responsibility to check that all the documents that they've put into that are still current and right. And there's all sorts of risk by something being wrong. Just a whole piece of regulation, for example, embedded within some sort of piece of know-how or precedent, etc. There's all sorts of risks in there. So I guess never ever more important has the life cycle of these pieces of content and assets been key and important. Making sure that the data is relevant, fresh, and as much as ever, making sure that all data is actually removed from the collection. That's absolutely vital.
Yeah, is that so? We were going to talk about the integration challenge, and firms obviously have a lot of AI tools. I suppose that's very much that's a problem that you would say fits into that. That perhaps losing track of the data flow. I know it's interesting. So in the early days of Teams, everyone was terrified about, whether it's get copious amounts of data just sat in chat. And, there's been lots of evolutions, but I suppose with having lots of different AI tools, that then naturally increases the risk of this happening.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that I think everyone has finally landed there, because I think when AI first kind of landed on the scene, everyone was trying to standardize on one or few tools, and I think there's now growing acceptance that you can have many tools, and they're going to do different jobs. You might have a Copilot for sort of productivity, etc. You might have a Harvey Legora for sort of general practice needs, and then you might have very specific systems for IP, for real estate, etc. So very practice specific applications, and they're all going to have or need access to different sets of data to do what they need to do. But they all potentially could have overlapping needs to that data. The documents that might need to be in Harvey might also need to be in Copilot, might also need to be in another real estate tool, for example. And so, we in iManage, we've been thinking a lot about this. We think a lot about those challenges, and I think up until, I mean, Caroline, you've heard me speak about this, but up until sort of the tail end of last year, the approach was one of two. You either took your data and you put it closer to the AI tool. You use some sort of storage. So in Harvey, you would use the Vault technology. In Copilot, you'd use the Graph API to effectively put data into that. So you take the data and you'd copy it and put it into that tool so that it had access to that. But what in reality that does is create you 10 different copies of the data in different stores. So the other approach, the other alternative, was to take the AI and bring it down to the platforms, the systems of data, embed it in so you didn't have to move the data. But the challenge there is that the AI is moving so quickly, and I'm not necessarily even talking about the Harveys and Lagoras here. When you look at the ChatGPT, the OpenAIs and the Anthropics, it's moving so quickly with the capability that you're never ever up to speed. You're never up to the latest version. Whatever you tie yourself to in terms of an AI, there's always something over there that looks a bit more interesting, and it's always the tool that you haven't got. So both of those approaches, moving the data up or moving the AI down, creates problems. It creates problems. It means you are tied into one tool. If you're up, you move the data up. It also means you can't kind of pick and choose lots of different tools. And the AI, if you move the AI down, it's problematic because you don't get access to the latest technology necessarily. So that's why, and I think you made a comment, Caroline, at the event. You were surprised that more people in the audience didn't mention this word. You know the word. It's MCP, Model Context Protocol.
Yeah.
It was a surprise to me because a lot of what we're talking about, I won't say it's fixed, but is enabled by MCP. MCP is an enabling technology that means we no longer have to move the data around the organization for the AI to be able to use it and utilize it. We don't have to put the data into the AI. The AI doesn't have to be put into the data.
Do you want to explain? I'm sure we've probably got a very techie audience, so forgive me if you're listening in and don't think I'm being patronizing, but just in case anybody's sort of still getting to grips with it, do you want to just explain MCP?
Sure. So MCP, the simple facts, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It was a piece of software that Anthropic, who are the authors of Claude, the LLM, wrote, and they open sourced that to the world in November 2024. So we're about 12 months in to this technology. And since then, just about every tech vendor, large-scale tech vendor on the planet has adopted MCP for a number of different reasons. Which is probably one of the, it's one of the hidden kind of success stories of AI, is this mass adoption of this technology that people don't see, a lot of people in the market don't see. And basically what MCP enables, it enables an LLM. So an LLM could be Anthropic Claude, it could be ChatGPT Enterprise, it could be Microsoft Copilot, it could even be the legal specific LLMs like Harvey, Lagora, etc. But it enables it to talk to effectively the APIs of the underlying platforms. So if Harvey, for example, wanted to, let's just simplify this. If Harvey needed to send an email as part of a workflow, how would it do that? It doesn't have an emailer. It doesn't know how to email. It doesn't have access to your enterprise email system, which is probably Microsoft 365. So it can't send an email. It doesn't know how to do that. What they were having to do prior to that, they'd have to write a connector, maintain that connector, and it would just work for Microsoft Exchange to send an email. But there are tens and tens of thousands of potential actions that these LLMs want to take on data. Tens and tens of thousands. So they're having to write tens and tens of thousands of connectors. So Anthropic came up with a common standard, a common protocol that enables an LLM to effectively reason and make decisions about what it's going to do on an online platform. So I'll be selfish and put this in kind of iManage terms. In an LLM now, you can ask, go and get me all the lease agreements from matter X that I've done in the last 2 years that were authored by my colleague Jan. And the LLM can reason across those, it'll go and get documents, and then it can start analyzing them. So go and get me all the parties information, etc. Now that's nothing that we haven't seen elsewhere. There's no kind of whoopee-doo there. But it's then able to take the next steps. So it could be extracting dates, putting them into a CRM system, putting them into a task platform. It could be sending emails. It could be setting up meeting invites. So it really is kind of MCP, to my mind, is the enabler of truly agentic AI. What we've had up until now is generative AI. I could generate text. I could generate an email, but I have to copy and paste it and put it into my email to do that. I could generate video. I could generate code. What agentic AI is now taking the generative steps and turning them into actions, so doing things. And that's why we've seen the growth of, OpenAI. I think they launched their agent builder in the last 2 weeks. Salesforce announced theirs. Claude are working on theirs, or Anthropic are. You've got Copilot Studio, where you can build agents, obviously from the Microsoft ecosystem. And Harvey and Legora are both developing workflow capabilities within their platforms as well. So we're starting to see now the agent wars start to happen. And we expect the next 2 years to be that very competitive space where whose agent tool, not the AI tool, whose agent tool is going to get to dominance.
Yeah, it's like, who's the platform of choice? Where everyone wants to be the platform and the agent, right? And I suppose you should point out that it can't. It's pretty obvious, perhaps, but like MCP, it can't create any new functionality that's not in the system. It can. So in terms of search, it will be able to be capable of whatever that platform is capable of. It will be capable of that and no more. I think sometimes there's sort of misunderstanding about that, perhaps. But
yeah, it's definitely not magic.
Yeah.
But actually, when you look at what it does look a little bit like magic, because you ask it to do a job and it starts doing jobs around different platforms. But it's not magic. It's only what the system can do. It can't make iManage Work send an email, because iManage Work doesn't know how to send an email. But it can create a document in iManage Work. It can create a matter in iManage Work. It can create tasks in iManage Tracker, for example. It could do security policies and iManage Security Policy. It could go and get the knowledge assets from iManage Insight. So it is, the search is probably where we are starting as a vendor, because it's one of the high impact use cases, and it's also one of the least risk in terms of like data spoliation. But this will go across many, many, many different capabilities, and it's being rapidly adopted.
Yeah, I was surprised it didn't come up more, but yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, I think probably most people here, at least looking at, I know I had a conversation with Chris DeWass at Rio Tinto, who was one of the first people that worked with iManage and MCP, doing his own work with ChatGPT. But things have moved on so fast since then. So then we had, just coming on to the DMS panel. So the panel was called Deliberately Provocatively, Is DMS the Future? We had 5 panelists, and they presented, they took a position, they came up with this themselves in terms of the way that they wanted it to be structured, because there's very much like, well, this is your panel and your conversation. So Tony McKenna, who chaired the panel, came up with one of the questions, which is, where's your head at in terms of DMS? And he got that from Love Island, because his kids watch Love Island. And apparently that's something.
Yeah, it's his kids. It's definitely his kids.
What DMS are you using, and why are you getting? Is DMS adding value or getting in the way of your lawyers? And if you could click your fingers, what would your DMS utopia look like? And I think you and I have sort of had a bit of a brief think about it. I think it came off that DMS is at a crossroads. I think some of the comments from the day, I should say, the panel then broke off into discussion groups. So there were 5 discussion groups, and then they came back to kind of share some findings. And I tried to float between the discussion groups. It's quite hard to absorb much when you're going between. I think I probably would have been better to stick in one, but anyway, I spent some time in your group and others, and some of the comments were that and actually someone started on with this sort of premise on the panel before, when we first started, that DMS is an overpriced utility. They talked about SharePoint quite a lot, and they talked subsequently about reimagining the potential to how you would reimagine the ecosystem. I think so. I don't know if my Neil Cameron's on the call, but I should say, given that we're being quite so direct about this, I spoke to Neil Cameron, and he said to me, have they forgotten the chaos that used to happen before I managed? But anyway,
exactly.
So I feel like in the interest of fairness, I feel like I should also reflect that. But Neil wasn't at the conference. But in terms of DMS being an overpriced utility to start with, what were your thoughts or takeaways from the conversations at the conference?
I mean, I think that kind of, I guess, so those words are particularly contentious, right? Overpriced is a subjective view on the value of something, right? I think ultimately the DMS is probably up there in a legal architecture for a firm in the sort of top 2-3 priorities, right? And there's reasons for that. This is, and I've spoken to many a managing partner over the years. It's the lifeblood of the firm. It's where we store our most important data, which is our client data. Number 2 might be the practice management system or the billing system, because you have to get the bills out to make money. But ultimately, this is the system of record for the organization. And I think we have to, again, as you say, what Neil referred to, have they forgotten the chaos? We have to not forget that there is a need for this, right? But under the SRA rules, you need to maintain an accurate reflection of your client records for a matter. There's a duty of care there as well. And so if you can do that without a DMS, I'd love to see how. That's what those platforms are ultimately being built for. Now, I think some of the questions come from, do users love the DMS today? Do they enjoy using the DMS? The part of it, no. Part of it, yes. There are times when users are very, very, very grateful that they have a DMS. It's often when they have to go back to the question that's being asked of something that happened 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. They have to go back to that item. That's when it's fantastic. But when there's maybe trying to do something very, very specific, they're trying to move fast, it can get in their way. Security and governance and having and maintaining records does get in the way of just doing stuff. I think where, I have fairly clear views on this. I don't think where the DMS today is where it will be in 2 years' time. I think I'd completely agree on that point. The idea that a DMS platform is where all your end users live day in, day out, creating content, managing content. The interfaces are going to change, and they're going to change fairly quickly in terms of where people are being productive in usage. Even things like Microsoft Office is beginning to feel like it's under threat. Are people going to be sat in Microsoft Word creating documents, etc., or are they going to start using AI interfaces to generate those documents? So everything in terms of our desktops and the applications we use is, threat is the wrong word, but it's up for grabs in this new world and the new capability. Now, the number one thing that's important here is not the DMS, it's the data. The data has to still be secure, governed. You still have a duty of care to understand what's happening to that data. It doesn't matter what the interface is. And increasingly, it's not going to be humans that are interacting with that data. When we talk about a client record or a client matter record, there's nothing to say that's got to be the matter record of a human-generated matter record. You have to maintain the data. So if you're using AI to generate artifacts and a human is having conversation with AI to get the output, that is part of the matter record. At some point, it's not really happened yet, but at some point, some people are going to be asked to produce things. How did you come to that decision? And some people are going to go, oh, I haven't thought about that inside our architecture. So we see the DMS actually expanding in terms of its coverage. It's going to start capturing these automated outputs that the AI is generating. And that's going to become important. And then what is also important is, this data, if the DMS is dead, the number one request we have is, can we connect the data up to our AI tools? Because that's where we're going to get the most value. Is the AI engines are hungry for data. They need the data to be able to get the best out of them. And where do they want to go? They want to go to iManage because it's a single, trusted, governed source. The data that they want is in those repositories. And if it wasn't nicely ordered in those repositories, it would be very hard to answer the questions that the end users have. The question from the end users, tell me everything we've done for client X, tell me everything we've done on matter X. If you haven't got that structured, understood, you're not going to be able to answer those questions.
I think so that one of the frustrations is around, we've talked about MCP, but taking that aside, or maybe you would say you shouldn't take that aside, but there's sort of, obviously most law firms, every law firm that I know is Microsoft 365. They're very much looking at how they can leverage the platform. And I think perhaps one of the frustrations is around integration and doing what they want to be able to do. And I know you work very closely with Microsoft, but I think that's definitely one of the frustrations that came up during the day, that sort of that they can't do currently what they want to do. I think that came through very strongly. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah, I think it's always been a traditional blocker. Now, data in the platforms has always been accessible, but it was accessible through either the interfaces that were provided or the integrations that were provided, or through the APIs. Now, the problem with the world up until this point is that the APIs are a technical barrier. You need skilled development staff to be able to navigate a system's APIs and to be able to get the true value out of the data and to mine the data. And really, I'm going to go back to MCP. What that does is really just reduce that technical barrier. I don't now need to be technical to get an AI engine to go and interrogate my data within a document management system. It's removed the barrier. I don't have to go and speak to a developer about how I do that. I talk to MCP, I talk to the LM, it works out how it goes and interrogates the data and gets the data for me. So that barrier has all but disappeared. And again, what's important to us, I guess, as iManage is, we have a vested interest in making sure that customers can get access to their data. Sometimes perception is opposite. We don't want to lock the data away, especially when you've all this opportunity with all the different AI vendors out there. What's important to us is that the data is secure and governed, and that customers can access it. And when, the kind of golden rule with iManage is every time we move data is expensive and it's prone to security risk and governance issues. So by duplicating data or having to move data across different AI engines, etc., you're introducing risk after risk after risk after risk. If the data can stay in place, one place, and then be opened up to all the repositories of choice, then fantastic. And while it's in place, if you can give it kind of that context that we've always given it, the matter centricity, that's still important. That's still what the users want to work with. They still work within matters.
I think it's interesting. There were different observations. So I think there was a general quite acknowledgement that firms needed DMS. Like we didn't have like complete sort of suggestion of anarchy or back to anarchy, but they, there was sort of a feeling of now with advances in AI and search as to what extent we continue to need those sorts of structures. There was different views on that as well, right? So we had somebody stand up and present who talked again about insurance, and they said very clearly, there's no chance that we could be ditching these sort of structures that we've found to work really well in terms of findability, version control, and an audit trail. But then there's also that sense of, well, with AI, do we need, documents are much more readily discoverable, and perhaps we should talk now on the topic of SharePoint, because there was a sort of, that was obviously something that this is something that's come up for years, hasn't it? But now, there really seems to be that very much, they're thinking about it a lot. It's safe to say, isn't it? And what did you make about that?
I think, I guess there's a few things, and I think Judy was on my roundtable, and she made a comment. And actually, the debate was around versions. It's like, is it just a version system, and can't we do versions everywhere? And I think this has always been a challenge for me as a vendor. When customers say a functionality such as versions, and then they look at all the vendors and they see all the vendors can do versions. Everyone can do versions. Everyone's got a version. That's not hard. A file system can do a version if you want. The problem is not the fact that it does versions, it's how it does the version. And does it deliver the needs of the end user who's trying to use that? And Judy made a very good point. She said, I don't like to speak bad of SharePoint, but she said, have you ever tried to track back to a version in SharePoint? As a lawyer, when you want to go to version 3, how do you do that? And it's snapshotted the file 100 times. Where's my version 3? What did we send to the client? Version what? And you get a timestamp and stuff. So even though we say these are features that look the same or feel the same because it's got the same word on it, how you utilize them or how they're used or how they're implemented is very, very different. And it's those attentions to detail that really deliver, and that's why we still have a legal document management system, is because it has very, 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 very specific functionality that's built very, very specifically for legal teams to use, and they have very specific needs. When we built Work 10, we moved off some of our legacy platforms, our legacy interfaces, the old desktop clients, etc. And we looked at all the features and functionality in the application. I think there's somewhere between 500 and 1,000 features. And we said, we want to simplify. We want to get rid of all these. We can get this down to maybe 50 features, core features. And we did that in the first iteration. We put it out into the customer base. And still to this day, we're putting those features back in, because still there's a lawyer in a major firm who uses one particular feature and they use it every day, and they use it 100 times a day, and they need it back because it's exactly what they do in terms of their workflow. So there's these really, really very, very nuanced ways. And it's not just about people and their kind of cultural thing about how they work and being old school, etc. There's just some very, very specific small elements of control that is important to a lawyer. I will just say on the SharePoint side as well, because I posed a question to the table, it's like, why do you want SharePoint? What is it?
And should we add at this point that they're not just talking necessarily about just pure native SharePoint? They might be talking about it with one of the legal wrappers, DMS wrappers. So exactly. We're not talking, it could be within that context as well. Yeah,
exactly. I said no one wakes up in the morning and said wants SharePoint. That's not a dream, right? It's not an outcome. And I think it comes down to two things. It's people want SharePoint because, or IT wants SharePoint because you can wrap it into your Microsoft 365 costs, and you're already paying for it to some extent. Although someone did comment and said it's not as cheap as you think. And once you've built the add-ons and all the different things to actually make it do what you potentially need it to do, it's a comparable cost. That's someone actually corrected that. I said the second thing is Copilot. You want it to be able to leverage Copilot because many people have invested quite rightly in Copilot. And again, that's where the MCP discussion I was hoping would go. It's like, okay, MCP is the enabler to have access to Copilot without having to move all your data into a repository to do that. Because by moving all that data, what else are you closing off? How's Harvey going to interact? How's Legora going to interact, etc.?
Are people currently doing that with Copilot? Are people using it with? I mean, I can't remember whether Chris at Rio Tinto he didn't refer to Copilot. Are people using MCP to connect their DMS and Copilot? I mean, there's challenges, obviously, but like
it's new to Microsoft. So Microsoft have adopted MCP as well. So now in Microsoft you can connect to MCP enabled sources. So that is now available. And Microsoft kind of come at this from both sides. So they're on both sides of the spectrum here. They are both a data system of data and an LLM, an orchestrator in essence. So they have Copilot, which is the orchestrator, but they have something like Microsoft Exchange or Microsoft 365, which is the data. So they actually have MCP services on Outlook, and they have Copilot being able to leverage those MCP services. But yes, Copilot Studio, you can now support data sources that are MCP enabled. And Microsoft, again, are kind of repivoting into that MCP world.
Yeah, I mean, we probably haven't got time to go down the whole governance side of things, but obviously that's one thing that iManage, is so important to make sure that people are not able to access information that they shouldn't be able to access, right?
We do have that question actually. It's quite timely. Slightly read the chat.
I thought they were going to leave it to the last second. How can we be sure of data security in a time of constraint, threats, and security breaches? Is there a particular feature we should be looking for when exploring AI products to offer more data security?
I think again, and again, this is where we see the challenge. I think when you start moving data, duplicating data, copying data around your organization, that you're increasing the threat vector, right? You're increasing the surface by which you can expose data. And you can't keep an eye on each and every tool that's within your environment and manage that data. And this is why I'm going to mention Harvey again. We've been working very, very, very closely with Harvey about how we can help each other, because the data sits in iManage often that they want to put into the vaults. But so a lot of clients, rightly or wrongly, don't want data in vaults because it's another compliance headache. They can't monitor it in the right ways that they monitor data in iManage. They haven't got all the security controls such as information barriers around that capability. So we've been working with Harvey about how they can come in, get the data, process it, and do what they need to do and build their workflows, but ultimately make sure the data is in iManage and also make sure the outputs come back to iManage.
Yeah.
So that it's secure and governed. And then you have the single audit trail, you have the single record, you have the single security policy, and you're ensuring that it's not moving around all the time. So one way is, it's good old centralization. Like we did in the late 1990s, centralize it, keep it central, and then provide the access to the tools that you want to provide it.
I mean, yes, makes a lot of sense from that perspective, for 100% sure. In terms of future gazing, so you know, that we've only got a few more minutes actually, which is the shame because it just goes so quick. But so what do you think? What can we expect to see in terms of firms' AI strategies? What they're sort of any patterns that are developing, or perhaps where they, you know, any gaps as well in between where firms are and where they think they are. What are you seeing?
I won't say it's a gap yet, but I'm not seeing huge moves yet. I'm seeing the signs of it towards kind of agentic builds, as in people building entire workflows. We're seeing some fairly simple workflows, sort of double step workflows, which is normally take a document, maybe have it as a legal authority, and then compare it to a policy document that maybe that you're reviewing or drafting, and then getting the report out at the end of it to say whether it's within tolerance or not. We're seeing those kind of workflows, but they're normally like two-step workflows, and they're very much constrained within the AI tool. What we're not seeing yet is kind of extensive multimodal agentic flows where it's touching different systems, doing different actions, and it's talking to the inside world, the outside world, and different people who are interacting within it. We're not seeing huge amounts. Again, we're seeing some, I must admit, I've seen some fascinating architecture diagrams in the recent weeks from some CIOs of law firms. And it's not necessarily the law firms you'd expect. It's not necessarily the top end, like the big many thousand magic circle firms, etc. I've seen it from sort of 300-400 user firms. And they're mapping out.
In terms of agentic workflow.
Yeah, like agentic architectures where they are, and it's not even just about the legal work. I've seen architectures like HR agents and finance agents and knowledge agents and security agents, and IT agents and legal agents, etc. So we're starting to see those being mapped out, but I'm not starting to see the build yet of those. But I think that's going to come in the next 1 to 2 years.
I've seen some. I think it's a misnomer that in-house teams are necessarily so far ahead that they've suddenly become really great at tech. Sorry, this is a huge generalization, but I have seen some quite cool stuff in-house around that, which is interesting. More so, like if I've been blown away by people using agentic AI, it's been in-house, and that's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I've started to see it. I think they've got less legacy and less problems in terms of they've got a greener landscape, and I think they're also more motivated because they're not going to get the humans to do these jobs. The humans didn't exist in the first place. The only way they can get these jobs within the budgets that they exist is to automate them and have the agents. I think that's what we're seeing.
It's their own data, right? So it's that historic, you know, situation. Is their own data. You know, law firms have to be so much more cautious because, you know, they're custodians. And we're going to have to wrap up. But so, would you say you're optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. I think there's going to be a lot of change, but I think there's within that change, and I think it was session 2, there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's absolute gold in those DMSs, and I think now we've got some tools that can actually finally get to that gold and do stuff with that gold. And so I see that as an opportunity, not as an issue, if that makes sense.
I feel like these conversations are so important, you know, like just going back to the 30th, and you know, those by the way, we're not planning to do anything on that scale again, so this is not a sales pitch. But those, I think really having those honest conversations is so important right now. I think really listening to each other, and hopefully there's stuff for all of us to take away, you know, and go back and go, okay, we'll find this is what they're thinking about, these are their struggles, these are their challenges, and then think about, you know, well, because people, change is really hard, right? Change is so hard, and it's people, if their needs are being met at the right price within reason.
And no one has all the answers, right? If anyone pretends they've got all the answers, you cannot keep up with the amount of change, as in even just keeping up with the amount of development that's going on in the world in terms of new applications, new features, capability is almost a non-forgiving task. So only by talking to people, getting their latest, getting updates from them, etc., you're ever going to find out about this stuff reliably. So,
well, thank you. We're at time, but and thank you. There's literally a question as we close. People always do this. I think we might end up having to do that question as we publish. Unless Paul, you want to
say a quick answer. Yes, there's a new connector for Ask iManage just released. I think it's available now. So yes, we've now got Tracker connector, an Insight connector, a iManage Work connector, an iManage Work Admin connector, and a Ask iManage connector.
There you go. That's a good way to wrap up. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for listening in. And Paul, thank you very much for having a very upfront, candid conversation. This is a time of change for everybody, and I really appreciate you making the time. And it was lovely to see you at our 30th. And congratulations on your own 30th.
I don't look it, but hey.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.